Greetings, I am Tom Earl. On this week's episode, we talk about the elevation of education with Stacey Cosden and Dr. Shaun Woodley. Check it out. Woo! Greetings, I am Tom Earl, and this is my year of depth. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you are here today sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy means the world to me. I hope you know that in this moment you are valued, you are loved, and you are appreciated just as you are. As you can see, I am not alone. I have two amazing guests. We got first the return guest to the mic, Stacey Cosden, and we got first-time guest, Dr. Shaun Woodley. What's going on, y'all?
How you doing? I'm excited.
Hi,
Looking forward to
Tom.
this.
Stacey, how are you? Please call me Shaun, please.
Okay, I got that, Shaun. Definitely will. It is an honor. I told you before we started, I was going on a walk and I thought, you know what would be great? Let's get the two of these on the podcast together. And we made it happen. So I appreciate your generosity in doing that for us. Let's go to the self-introductions. So why don't we start with you, Shaun, since some folks know who Stacey is from past episodes. Tell us a little bit about Dr. Shaun Woodley, or just call me Shaun moving forward. Tell us about yourself, Shaun.
Sure. As Tom mentioned, Shaun Woodley. I am an author, an educator, a speaker, and pretty much anything that sheds light on and brings greater awareness to urban and culturally diverse schools and the needs of the babies in those schools. I'm all about it. As you can see here, just shining on my shirt here, I pretty much profess three different things everywhere I go, regardless of what I do. And that is to teach, hustle, and inspire. And each of those three terms, they have meaning. They're not random. So the teach is all about how we unlock intellectual treasure. How do we get our babies from where they are to where they need to be? That gap that exists, that's our challenge each and every day that we step into these classrooms, virtually or in person. The hustle, I'm a hip hop fan, so that's how we can't stop and we won't stop learning. It has that 90s Diddy Bad Boy vibe to it. Take that. And then the inspire part, that's about how we spread love and light. In this work that we do, it can be a thankless profession. And so we have to make sure that in everything that we do, we intentionally not just give because it's our nature to give, but we make sure that we pour back into ourselves so that we continue to have more to give and give to one another as educators and practitioners in this profession, doing that by spreading love and light.
Yes. People are fired up. That was awesome, Shaun. Grateful to have you here. Stacey, folks know you from past episodes as the marketing expert. So why don't you introduce to us the other side, or not just the other, but another side of who Stacey is and how it relates to the conversations we're going to be having.
Sure. It's hard following Shaun because I'm not nearly as cool as he is, but here we are. So I have been working in public education since 1997. So a few years. And I've worked in different capacities in the classroom, directly with parents, front office. I've kind of been a little bit everywhere and on the parent side. So I am super invested in public education. And Shaun, when you said these babies, that got my heart because every child I've ever worked with, those are my babies. So I feel that, and I will do anything I can to make sure that they're in a safe space and they feel safe and they feel seen and known and loved. And there's disconnects, and I just want to do anything I can to prevent that. So I do a lot of advocacy and that kind of thing for public schools in general.
I love that. And Stacey, you didn't need a disclaimer. You're super awesome. Come on.
Oh, you're too kind.
Okay, team. So let's start with a personal one, and then we'll go to the conversation at hand. So it goes like this. This is a prompt that you get to fill in the blank on. So the bios are awesome. The self-introductions are awesome. But if you really knew me, you'd know that ...
If you really knew me, you would know that everything that I have my hand in has some sort of creativity attached to it. I I can go back as far as I can remember, and whether it is music, whether it is my career, whether it is what I do with my family, whether it is cooking, it has some sort of creativity infused with it. That's part of the driving energy behind what I have the privilege of being able to do each and every day, is that I get to infuse creativity with it. Teaching, teaching teachers, marketing. I get to leverage all of that. And sometimes my wife, she gets on me because I'll get an idea and I'll lose an entire day. But until I'm able to like see it through with like a social media post. That's why I gravitate so heavily towards like Instagram, because I'm a very visual person. And so until I see that post out, until I have it in Canva just the way that I want it, or I get this video, I've lost days doing that. But I always get the outcome that I want. So in my mind, it's not a loss, but creativity.
I love that. I've heard a number of really successful. I don't want to use the word successful though in like the capitalist sense. Like, yes, that, but also successful in terms of movements, all of that stuff. Have that same, when I get an idea, I have to scratch that itch and I have to do it in a very precise way. So I think you're in good company on that, Shaun. So I appreciate that. What about for you, Stacey?
Okay, if you really knew me, you would know that much like Shaun, I'm kind of a creative spirit, but everything that I do is relational. People. It's about people. I do a lot in my community. I'm big on building community within anything that I do. I do community theater, and it's makes my whole day, but I could go on. But everything that I do is about building community and building into not just my own community, but building community among other groups and organizations and kind of in everything. I'm all about people.
I love that. Well, we appreciate getting to know y'all a little bit before we jump in. So it seems that everybody wants to have their hands in, oh, here's how to educate kids. I was just watching the We Work documentary, and even they came up with their own We Grow. We're going to teach kids how to learn. It was, I think, 30 grand a year to go to, but they were going to show kids how to learn. So what is the conversation that's missing, or that we should be having, or that in your mind, what's the conversation that we need to be having when we talk about education?
Should I jump in there first? I mean,
you want to take it, Shaun? I'm letting you take it first.
There are so many different ways I can go into this. I'll start with this. One of the things that we find ourselves fighting against is a system that was not designed to educate everyone. We're talking about an antiquated system that was developed 100 plus years ago and essentially has not changed since. That system, the way that it was designed, maybe intentionally, maybe not, but it didn't have everyone in mind. And so when that system was developed, there were, in that turn of the industrial revolution type age, when education really began to churn out, and you had schools popping up everywhere, and it became public, they saw some levels of success, but as the world changed, education did not. And as the world and the country became more diverse, education has not. And so essentially the way that we are educated, the way that we are taught to teach, it still is rooted very sternly and very firmly in this outdated system. And what happens is, when you have children that end up going through this system, I'll use myself as an example. I grew up in a very urban and culturally diverse community. And when you see people like me, someone that quote unquote made it, I ask myself, did I make it because of the system, or did I make it in spite of the system? Because the numbers show two very different things. People that look like me, we don't succeed at the rates that people that don't look like me. You'll see very stark differences, and it's consistent. So that tells me what you can look at this one of two ways. You can say, all right, well, people that look like you, Black people, people of color, maybe they don't learn. Or you can look at it the other way. Maybe the system that they learn in isn't designed for them. And we talked about this the other day. If we don't teach the way that these students learn, if the students don't learn the way we teach, we have to teach the way that they learn. And some of us make sense of the world in a completely different way than what public education does. I'm happy. I'm so happy that this has become more and more a part of the conversation, because you'll see genuine efforts from educators each and every day to try and do different things. But what's happening is that they feel like they're stuck in quicksand because they're trying to get out of a system that they themselves were taught in and that they themselves were taught to teach in. And that's extremely difficult, but I'm here for it. That's the fight that I walk into work every day for, and I live for that.
I love all of that. I got chills just now. So just kind of on that same note, Shaun, we were discussing, you made it, and was it because of or in spite of? And I feel like I'm kind of in that same space. And I think a big thing that we're seeing is, it's awesome because people are noticing now, but okay, so I made it or whatever. I did really well in school, like took my SATs when I was 12 because I was a nerd like that. But then it's now being noticed that like I shouldn't be held to this thing and like become a standard. And people, that's kind of what happened. Like, well, obviously children of color can succeed because this one did, that kind of thing is now being seen. And that's a huge thing that needs to be worked on, because as you said, all kids are not going to learn the same. And just that idea that you need to teach the way that they're going to learn instead of expecting everyone to learn in this bubble.
I love that. One thing it reminds me of, because hearing you all talk about, the system not being designed for you, was I was hearing somebody talk about standardized tests and their inherent structural racism. And I forget the example, but he was sharing something to the effect of, so let's say I'm Mexican or, and I'm indigenous. And the question asks, when did Columbus find or discover America? So I can either get it right, I'm using quotations, right? Say 1492 or whatever. But then what do I sacrifice in my identity to get it right? Is there things that come to mind for you when you think of, where you're saying the system isn't built for us, or the educational, the structure or the pedagogy isn't built for us? Is there anything that comes to mind for you all as some examples?
I mean, history is the glaring one. There's so much that's missing. American history is the founding fathers, but they weren't the only ones around, but that's who gets talked about. And just kind of these disconnects when we talk about history, like when we talk about the civil rights movement, that so many kids grew up thinking that, oh, Martin Luther King Jr. came and everything's fixed. So, and so then you create adults that are like, what? Huh? So, and those are things that leave children of color feeling very alone, because you don't want to be the one kid that's like, excuse me, pardon me. You don't want to be that one child who already feels othered or different or whatever, and then bring up questions or question a teacher. You just don't do that. So that's a big one. And as far as, English language arts and that kind of thing, most of the books feature no children of color, really. And every once in a while, if it's never, that child is never the main character. And that goes to learning and reading development, because if a kid's not interested, they're not going to be a voracious reader if all they think is out there are books about kids that don't look, live, or act like them. So it causes a disconnect, and these kids are slower to learn because they're not going to read for fun. This is a chore. So kids that read for fun, even if it's difficult, if they find something they like, they're still going to build those skills, but if kids are not interested, it's automatically, it takes that down a few notches because they're not going to do that for fun. It's a thing that they have to do.
Mm.
I saw an example one time of a colleague who, awesome dude, white guy too. And he said, I was teaching, I want to say American history, maybe middle school level, 5th grade, 6th grade, something along those lines. He said he had a conflict with a parent one time because of the content he was teaching. He was teaching outside of the curriculum. And the parent, another white male, disagreed with what he was teaching. I don't want a daughter exposed to this information. I don't want you teaching. Why can't you teach what the book is saying? He was like, let me show you something. So he took a textbook and he just took it and said, stop. Opened it, random page. What do you see? White male. Did the same thing. He did about 4 times. Every single time. It was either talking about or from the perspective of a white male. So how many people are you eliminating? How many stories are not being told? How many perspectives are just completely being ignored? And he made a conscious effort to be more inclusive in his classroom because the world revolves, according to these textbooks, around white males, but that's not reality. More importantly, what are we saying? If I remember correctly, either he had very few or no Black students in his classroom, but even still, it is just as important for those white students to be exposed to the story, to the narratives of people of color, just as important for them to hear it as it is for Black students to hear. And I thought that said so much to me about his character and what he felt and believed about education. And I just thought that was a very interesting experience because I could directly relate to that. Going up through the textbooks that we read when I was in school, each and every one of them, if people of color were discussed, it was from a perspective of struggle, period. Very rarely did you hear about the successes. Very rarely did you hear about the triumph. Very rarely did you hear about the true history of people of color. It was always in some way, shape, or form rooted by struggle. Now, compound that with that's what you learned in kindergarten. That's what you learned in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, all the way up through 12th grade. You're talking about 13 years straight of being fed a narrative that you come from struggle.
And also almost that's who you are. That's all you are, is struggle and suffering. And not there's you don't read about joy in those textbooks and in school. And that is hard to develop emotionally in a lot of ways if you don't think that, even if you believe that, if you know that the people around you don't believe that, and that the school system that you're in doesn't believe that, it makes it really tough.
Well, I appreciate that. What comes to mind for you in the role that staff recruiting or hiring or the makeup of the teachers in a school, what role do you think that plays into this conversation that we're having?
It's huge, because even if you're not getting any talent pool of any sort of diversity, when that talent pool comes, are they ready to work with these kids who are diverse? And if you're not getting diverse candidates, then why? Because there's plenty of Black people all over that have degrees, and why aren't they found? And I can speak for one school system in particular that it is probably one of the most diverse counties in this area of the country. And they, within that kind of boundary, within maybe I'd say about even a 15-minute drive from the school headquarters, there's 2 historically Black universities, 2. but they don't recruit from those. They recruit from all the others around that. Oh, we recruit from this one. Oh, we recruit from this one. They're at the college fairs there. And then I guess there weren't enough people here. They went all the way from Baltimore to the Midwest, to their college fairs to recruit there. When you've got this huge pool to schools that are never, ever tapped, recruited from, there's no interns coming in from there. So then, well, why don't we have, well, I'm sorry, that's all we have. We only have white applicants. Well, where are you going to look for folks? If it's when it's glaringly obvious that you've gone all around and even out of the state, and you have two schools that are right there, and you don't go to those, like, you've shown what you're looking for, in my opinion.
Anything come to mind for you, Shaun, or did Stacey nail it for you?
She nailed it. Absolutely nailed it for me.
I have a couple other questions on my mind that I want to ask, but before we move on to the questions I have, is there any questions that either of you have for each other, or that you just want to ask? Do you just want to put in the space, or anything coming to mind that you want to speak to or ask?
So, Shaun, what was your turning point when you decided, what, I'm going to teach and do what I love every day, but I'm also going to go out and do something to help these other teachers and equip them for what they need? What was kind of like the switch that flipped to lead you into that?
I kind of stumbled into education in a very backhanded way, if you will. Growing up, I grew up in the church, and I was a musician. And so my dad played the organ and I played the drums. And so I started maybe about sixth grade or so. And so from that point forward, I played on Long Island, played at a small family church, but we would travel around to different churches and things. And I got to meet a lot of other drummers. And from sixth grade, I told myself that when I go to college, I'm going to study music, and then I'm going to get picked up and go on tour with Usher. That was my dream. Sad to say that did not happen. And so in high school, studying, I studied a lot of arts, music and fine arts. And so I got some really good advice around my junior year from one of my music theory teachers. And he told me, he said, you know what, you're an excellent musician, but he said, just in case you don't get picked up and called from, Arista Records or Atlantic Records to go on tour, just give yourself a backup plan. He said, study music, but also study education. Best advice I got at that time. And so being a double major, if you will, I went into college. I went to an HBCU called Hampton University. Greatest decision of my life. And it was really just a turning point for me, because I got there and realized that everybody that was in that program as a musician was 10 times the musician that I was. And so that was pretty much it. I saw that coming, stepping on campus. So I said, there goes that. So I said, let me see what this education thing has to go. And I started maybe my sophomore, junior year, getting into my fundamentals of education courses, ed psych, and all of those types of things. And it was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed it. Did some observations, graduated, did my student teaching, went to grad school, did a 5-year program, and was hooked from there. Being in the classroom then, I started to have a greater calling, because I started to have some levels of success years in, but I wanted to do more. So took a leadership position. Didn't really feel that was for me. I said, admin, I don't really know. So I don't really like the politics of all of this. It was August of 2009. We were getting ready to start the 2009-2010 school year. And we had that opening convocation to begin the school year. And all the teachers from the district were in this one arena, and they had keynote speaker, and the dude lit everybody in there on fire. And I walked out of there and had probably the second best year I've ever had in my life. And I said, all right, boom, that's it. And so from that moment on, I said, that is what I need to do, because I said, if he can do that for me, what can I do for others? Like, I saw myself in that moment. I walked out that August on fire. October, I enrolled in a PhD program and started my research. I kept teaching full time. I was full-time DJ. I was a full-time PhD student, and I just juggled them all and did it. And so I came out of that and said, all right, let's go. I want to teach college. I want to start to get into this professional development. I've done all this studying. I want to start speaking. I want to write a book. And I did all of it. And so that is essentially, in a nutshell, the story of how I somewhat got to where I am right now.
I love that. That's awesome.
God's plan.
What about you, Stacey? Back at you.
Well, I've just always been, like I said, I love people and I love kind of the underdog. So I've always worked with, I used to work with really tiny kids, and straight out of high school, I started working in the school system and was just like, I think I love this. And this is like my community. And like, I understood those kids so well, and just deep, I just got it because I grew up there and I went to that same elementary school as I grew up. I actually worked for my first grade teacher, which was the best. So, and she's still my buddy today. I love her. So just with the connections that I formed as a kid in that school and in those spaces, like, I wanted to do that for someone else. And it just makes my day, like, and not going back with everyone now has been a little bit weird for me. I was there today and it was just like, I miss my babies, And so all of these years I've left, I was even did healthcare. I was just kind of like, but I would always come back to education. And I was always back in a classroom, and I was always back with these families in this community and like advocating for them. And like, it just really fires me up. So I keep trying to distance myself, and I just never can. So I've given up. I was like, okay, I will do all of my other things, but education is still going to be there, and these babies are still going to be forever part of who I am. So
I love that. Such a great question, Stacey. I appreciate that. Shaun, was there anything you wanted to drop into the space before we move on to the other questions I got for y'all?
No, that solidifies it for me. Just my really backwards way of walking into education, if you will. But I'm glad I ended up here.
I love it. When we talk about culturally diverse urban education, I feel like one of the conversations that I hear that I really appreciate that happens is really the role that unaddressed pain or trauma plays in the school environment in working with young people. Is there anything you want to speak on about trauma or the pain that young people are going through on a personal, interpersonal, systemic home environment that you think educators should be aware of?
I can start on that if that's okay. It tends to be the go-to that, if a child is acting up or whatever, that there's, something wrong with them, or they get labeled as a bad kid or a problem child or whatever. But there's always something underneath of all of that. And when you have kids coming in, I mean, you're not going to be in a great mood if you didn't eat last night. If you don't know if you're eating tonight, it's not going to be fun. When you are, you have two outfits and they don't fit that well, or, you're already coming in with a feeling of, not being enough or being different, or that someone's not going to understand. So immediately kids start to put their defenses up. And then when kids put their defenses up and then they act up, we need more of that, like digging in to find out the why and not just focusing on the what. Because kids can feel if if they're judged. So if they don't feel safe with you because you've already judged them or labeled them, then they're not learning anything. They're going to disrupt everybody else from learning. And that's just going to keep following them. Like I'll tell you a story. One specific child had bounced around a lot, like a lot. And, they were dealing with like housing insecurity and food insecurity. And this child had a very definitely like just tense and did not trust people because she'd been through a life that she's not trusting people. So she's in a classroom and they kept calling down, oh, so-and-so's having an issue. So I just finally went and I said, it's fine. It's fine. And I took the child out of the room and we just walked and we talked. And one of the other people that was working in the area at the time had no idea, because Baltimore, we have a very distinct accent. Sometimes you can't really hear mine because I did theater and I push some of that out. But when I get excited, it comes out and people are like, what did you just say? You need a translator sometimes. Things are different. So the other person was not from here. And this girl just exploded and every frustration, every anger just let out. And she said, well, how did you know what she was talking about? I was like, you're going to have to get with it. If you're going to be in this community, you got to learn how to understand our kids. But I just listened to her and asked her and talked to her the way that she speaks. Like this is my everyday, this is my work. This is work, Stacey. But that child isn't going to connect with that, So I just talked the way that she talked, used the kind of words that she used, the clean ones at least, used the kind of words that she used, and was just chill with her. And she just let it all out. And the fact that anybody was surprised that happened showed that people don't take that extra time to understand what a kid needs and culturally to be supportive in any way to that child, to not judge for, grammar or, whatever. If she didn't feel judged, she knew she could say what she wanted to in her way, the way that she talks, and she felt comfortable immediately. And that's a huge thing. It's like you've got this kid, this ball of trauma, and all it takes sometimes is one little and everything explodes. So it's going to come out one way or the other. So if you take that time to try to meet kids where they are, then it's going to explode in a healthier way and not in an unhealthy way.
I think that I was able to, I've been there in those situations, especially most often I've been one of the few Black males in the building. And so typically if there's an issue, especially with one of the young Black boys, they're going to my room, or I need to come talk to them, or because what I found, and I heard it kind of put this way and it makes sense, is that for a lot of our students, and thinking back to my days of being in the classroom, this is how I was too. For a lot of our students, we kind of feel we have to live this duplicitous kind of role where I have to be somebody that I'm not in front of my teacher. And that's exhausting. It's exhausting. More importantly, I have to really think differently. So in order to think differently, I can't think about this Pythagorean theorem right now. I got to think about how I'm supposed to act in order for myself to be received and to be perceived as being respected. And so, well, it takes too much energy, so forget this. And I'm flipping the table. Like, that's what you'll see a lot of times. And so because I was able to connect with students and they did not have to put on that mask in front of me, it was that much easier for me to get to the root of the problem and to send them back to class and get that act right. So what Stacey said is 100% accurate. If you can take the time to really establish a level of comfort with those students so that they feel comfortable with you. Like, you can get so much further. What you're seeing a lot of times is symptoms of some sort of discomfort, whether you believe it or not, some sort of distrust. And also, I think it's important to mention that a lot of times, yes, home life can be difficult for a lot of our students, but that is not everybody's story. I think it is very, very important to emphasize that it is not everybody's story. Sometimes what you're seeing in the classroom is really just being tired of having to put on a mask, being tired of not feeling like I'm wanted here, being tired of not feeling like I am valued here. It may not be said, I don't want you here, or it may not be said, I am not valued, you are not valued, but is felt. And that can mean so much more than the words. Not only is it felt, it's felt day in and day out. And so some of our students don't have the coping skills that others may and be able to deal with it. Some of them, they'll retreat into their little shell and just, shut down and be quiet. Some of them, you'll see them acting out. Those are symptoms. Some of them can take that and adjust their behavior. But it's the ones who haven't built up that skill set to do that yet, they're labeled the problem child. When really, again, what you're seeing is just a symptom of them not feeling valued, seen, or trusted.
That expectation of assimilation is trauma inducing itself. So they might not have come with trauma, but it happens because they're, as you said, wearing that mask. And that is a traumatic experience for trying to be someone else, for literally just being who you are and not being able to do that. That is trauma inducing.
And Tom, you asked for examples, like perfect example. If I'm someone who, it may not be, what's a proper way to say this? I'm trying to think of the politically correct way, but I may be someone who grew up in my household using certain verbiage, using certain slang, certain words that I know exactly what they mean. People around me know what they mean, but yet when I get into class, my teacher is, well, no, you shouldn't say that like that. So now in my mind, it's processed. I'm processing it as being wrong and being judged. Certain African-American vernacular, certain, just lingo, hood around the way terminology that is extremely common. And then yet I use those words in class when I'm talking to my friends, or even when I'm talking to my teacher, because that is how I make sense of the world. But then the reaction that I get is that I'm wrong, and that what's associated with that is I'm unintelligent.
Yes, absolutely. And then when a child feels like, well, they already think I'm dumb, that's not going to motivate them to do anything. They're shutting down in one way or another, because a person has decided that they are unintelligent because of the way that they speak culturally. And we would not do that if somebody came from, another country and spoke in whatever dialect. But that's what happens here. And that's what happens to these kids all the time.
Whew, I think a lot of people listening right now really connected with what you two were just talking about. So let's say that I'm saying, yes, I'm with you. And we only have a couple minutes here left. So I want to leave with, what is the way then that I start to build that connection, that I start to demonstrate that I see you, I value you, I respect you, I love you. I want this room for you this to be your safe space to express and to grow. So I know I'm asking the big question in a little bit of time. What do you think is, one thing or an idea or a mindset or something, a shift, a tool that you kind of want to leave folks with who are right there with you in terms of, okay, I hear this, I see behavior I'm doing, or what are your thoughts on something they can do?
One of the biggest things I think that you can immediately do is learn to and understand your level of emotional intelligence and where you are on that spectrum with your self-awareness, with your social awareness. When you have higher levels of self-awareness and social awareness, you can see how every interaction that you have with a student, it falls on a spectrum. It's either some form of toxic or nourishing. And you can see in any given interaction where it falls by the reaction of that student. Now, most times, what we'll do is we'll provide some sort of feedback. We'll give some sort of comment, and however the student takes it is how they take it. And then that's it, because what I say goes as the educator. But when you're self-aware enough, when you have the social awareness to understand, all right, I see that I delivered this. This is how it was received. Was the way that I delivered it the way that I intended it for it to be received? If so, why not? Why did the student take it that way? What is it that I do or don't know about that student's interpretation and perception of the information that I delivered caused this reaction, and how could I change it so that the next time it isn't so toxic and it skews more towards nourishing? And then you get that feedback and you make those adjustments, and then you do it again and move further up that scale so that each type of communication going forward, it skews further and further away from toxic and more towards nourishing. And what you'll find is that you'll be able to develop the awareness and the skill set to know what to say in real time and know when what you've said doesn't work and why.
Yes, so much of it is just being aware of how things are landing when you say it to a child. And I get it. It's hard when you have, 30 some little faces staring at you. But if you said something, you can usually immediately tell by the look on a child's face, body language, that kind of thing. And if you think, oh, I might have made a misstep, be okay with humbling yourself and talking to that kid later. Hey, I know we had this conversation about this earlier. I felt like maybe you felt XYZ, or can you tell me, how did that make you feel? Are you okay? And not making it about you, but making it about that child and showing that child that you are valued and you matter and how you feel matters. And I want to be my best for you. And just being able, and that does take humbling and it's hard, but it's important because that's how kids build that trust. If they know that they're not just, a face or a number, that they are valued and that their teacher cares enough about them to make sure, even if they did something that they shouldn't have done, to make sure that they were okay.
Team, this has been so amazing. I know folks listening right now are getting a lot out of this. So for folks who want to continue the conversation, where can they get at you? Where can they learn more? All of that kind of stuff. Let's start with you, Shaun. Where can folks learn more about you?
Sure. My website is teachhustleinspire.com. The hashtag on all social media should bring me right up. Or if you're on Instagram, at @TeachHustleInspire. If you're on Twitter, which I'm on there every day, pretty much at Shaun Woodly. Teach Hustle Inspire was too long.
Awesome,
Stacey. Found on Instagram, Stacey Renee, STACEYRENEEC. Oh, that was a lot of letters. And I'm also Stacey Cosden on LinkedIn. I'm there a lot, so holla.
Hey, y'all, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us your brilliance, your energy, your time. I know we got a lot out of this. I know I personally was resonating with so much of this. So just from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the both of you for being here. So thank you.
And thank you, Tom. I appreciate you sharing your space with us.
Yes, thank you, Tom. This means a lot.
Of course, of course. So here's our closing ritual, is for you to share an invitation with those who are listening. So what would you like to invite them to do, to be, to consider, to think about, to evolve into, to read, to listen to grow? What is your invitation? And why don't we, if you're cool with it, Stacey, why don't we start with you?
Well, I just want to invite people to open their minds and be willing to take constructive criticism and feedback without defense, and then learn from that. Go and do research on your own. And I'm just inviting everyone in to conversation, and just calling everyone in.
I like that. Calling everyone in, not calling them out, calling them in. I want to invite everyone to transformational growth, whether that for you is becoming more self-aware and developing your emotional intelligence, whether that is for you developing your relationship building skills, whether that for you is developing personally so that you can develop professionally. If you think about it mathematically speaking, if you focus on just developing at a rate of about 0.5% better each day, if you think about it in terms of like compound interest, if I get 0.5% better today, then you get 0.5% better tomorrow. By the end of 30 days, I'll be 16% better. But by the end of an entire school year, like 180 days with that compound interest, I'll be more than twice the person that I was when I originally started. So if you think of setting a small incremental goal of being just 0.5% better each day, that's it, just a half. You can do that, can't you? I know you can. 0.5% better each day to transform for transformational growth. I invite you to do that.
I love that. That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate the heck out of y'all. Everybody go and show Shaun and Stacey your love. Let them know how much you appreciate them. Get after them. Get yourself a Teach, Hustle, Inspire t-shirt today. Support the movement. Thank you once again, y'all. I appreciate the heck out of y'all, and I wish you all of the success that there is.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you again, Tom.
Yes, indeed. And to all those who are listening, as always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.